When people hear the phrase secure attachment or healthy relationships, they usually imagine someone very confident, very calm, almost emotionally untouchable. Like a person who drinks green smoothies, wakes up without an alarm, and never checks their phone twice. Someone who, when a message isn't answered, just smiles mysteriously and goes for a walk. And already at that point, a lot of people think, okay, clearly not me. Because most people listening are thinking, I care too much. I feel deeply. I notice everything. I notice commas. I notice when there is no comma. And that's where a lot of confusion starts. Because people who feel secure in relationships aren't calm because nothing touches them. They're calm because they don't panic about what they feel. And that difference sounds small, but it changes everything. People with a secure way of relating still feel anxiety. They still feel uncertainty. They still notice shifts in energy, changes in tone, silence, distance. They're not emotionally asleep. They don't float through life on a cloud of enlightenment. They just don't treat every feeling like a fire alarm. For many people, a strange feeling is immediately like, okay, something is wrong, we need to do something, preferably right now, preferably dramatically. For people who feel more secure in relationships, the feeling shows up, they notice it, and it's more like, interesting. Let's see. Not everything needs an emergency meeting with yourself at 2 a.m. Most people think secure attachment is about luck. Like some people were just raised perfectly, never had their feelings ignored, never liked someone who didn't like them back, never stare at their phone waiting for a reply that clearly wasn't coming. But when you really watch how people with secure attachment move through relationships, you see something else. They don't avoid mess, discomfort, or uncertainty. They just don't immediately build their entire identity around it. One of the first places this shows up is silence. Someone doesn't reply. A few hours go by, maybe a day. And for many people, that silence immediately turns into a full Netflix series in their head. Episode 1, they're busy. Episode 2, they're losing interest. Episode 3, they never liked me. Episode 4 is usually you rereading the chat from 6 months ago. People who feel more secure in relationships also notice the silence, but it doesn't turn into a personal investigation. It's more like, okay, something's happening there, not something is wrong with me as a human being. They don't rush to fill the gap. They don't send a message that technically says one thing, but emotionally screams, please confirm my existence. They don't suddenly become extra funny, extra chill, extra understanding, like they're auditioning for the role of most low-maintenance person alive. And it's not because they don't care. It's because closeness doesn't feel fragile to them. They don't experience connection as something that disappears the moment there's a pause. To them, silence is just silence, not a verdict. A helpful way to think about it is trust. If you trust a chair, you sit down. You don't test it. You don't gently lower one leg first while preparing for impact. You just sit. If you don't trust it, you hover. You tense. You're ready to jump up at any second. People with a secure way of relating trust the chair. And yes, sometimes the chair still breaks, but they don't spend their entire life hovering just in case. Another place this shows up is space. People with healthy relationship dynamics don't use distance as a weapon. They don't disappear to make someone worry. They don't go silent to see if the other person cares enough to chase. They don't turn absence into a psychological experiment. If they need space, they usually say it, simply, calmly, without a dramatic soundtrack. Something like, I need a bit of time to reset. I'll check in later. And what's interesting is that they don't feel guilty for needing space, and they don't feel powerful for taking it. Space isn't punishment, it's maintenance. Like closing all the tabs on your browser when your computer starts sounding like it's about to take off. Another big difference is that people who feel secure in relationships don't collapse their entire life into the relationship. They can care deeply and still have a center that isn't the other person. Their mood doesn't fully depend on one message, one reaction, one day. They don't cancel their life waiting for clarity. They don't put their values, friendships, sleep, or self-respect on hold just to feel chosen. They might feel anxious, of course, but they don't outsource that anxiety to the relationship. They don't make it someone else's full-time job to stabilize their inner world. And this isn't because they're stronger or wiser. It's usually because they're familiar with emotions. They know feelings move, they rise, they fall. They don't need immediate action every time something feels uncomfortable. So instead of acting, they observe, quietly, without a full internal debate. Observation for them isn't obsessive, it's just awareness, like noticing the weather. Oh, it's cloudy today. Not, this means my life is over. This is also why people with a secure way of relating don't audition for love. They don't perform. They don't twist themselves into what they think will be easier to keep. They don't suddenly become someone who doesn't need much when actually they do. They watch how someone shows up, over time, calmly. Not with suspicion, but with curiosity. If someone is warm one week and distant the next, they don't immediately try to fix it. They register it. Okay, that's a pattern. Not a sentence, just information. Because of that, they don't rush emotional intimacy ahead of relational clarity. They let consistency build trust, not intensity. And this part is important because intensity can feel amazing. Intensity feels like chemistry, it feels like sparks. It feels like late nights and long messages and that feeling where you're a little bit anxious, but you call it excitement. People with healthy relationship dynamics recognize that feeling. They've felt it too. They just don't confuse adrenaline with safety. When something feels activating, they don't say, "This must be love." They say, "Interesting. This is loud." And instead of speeding up, they slow down. It's also worth saying this clearly. Secure attachment does not mean boring. People who feel secure in relationships laugh, they flirt, they're playful, they feel desire, they feel excitement. They just don't need emotional roller coasters to feel alive. Their nervous system doesn't require chaos to register connection. They can enjoy something without losing sleep over it. Communication is another place where the difference becomes very visible. People with a secure way of relating don't wait until they're emotionally full and then explode. They don't collect small annoyances like souvenirs and then dump them all at once. They talk early, when things are still manageable, and usually not in a dramatic way, more like thinking out loud. I noticed this. That felt a bit off for me. I'm not fully sure why, but I wanted to name it. There's no emotional courtroom, no closing arguments, and because it's not heavy, it usually stays light. When conflict happens, they don't avoid it, but they don't chase it either. They're not trying to win or prove a point. They're trying to understand what just happened. They talk about experience rather than character. Less, "you always," more, "when that happened, I noticed I pulled back." The focus isn't blame, it's orientation, like, where are we right now? If you're interacting with someone who has this kind of emotional stability, it can feel unfamiliar. Sometimes even boring at first, especially if you're used to emotional highs and lows. They don't react strongly to mixed signals. They don't escalate. They don't mirror chaos. And that calm can be mistaken for distance. But it's not distance, it's capacity. They can sit with uncertainty without trying to control it. If you're dating or relating to someone like this, the best way to interact with them is surprisingly simple. Be clear. Be honest. Don't overperform. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be real. They're not looking for intensity. They're looking for congruence. Does what you say match what you do? Does your warmth have rhythm, not spikes? If it doesn't align, they won't punish you. They won't disappear dramatically. They'll adjust. They might lean back a little. They might ask a question. They might wait and see. And if over time it doesn't fit, they'll let go without villainizing anyone. No dramatic exits, no rewriting history, just a quiet sense of, this doesn't quite fit for me. And this part really matters. Secure attachment isn't a personality, it's a pattern. It grows when you experience enough moments where emotions don't turn into emergencies. So if you're listening and thinking, I don't behave like this, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It usually means your system learned to stay alert, and systems can learn new rhythms, often by watching people who move slower, by noticing that nothing terrible happens when you don't react immediately. by realizing that closeness doesn't disappear just because you paused. Sometimes the most secure thing you can do is nothing. Not ghosting, not withdrawing, just not escalating. Letting a moment be a moment. Letting someone reveal themselves over time instead of interrogating the future. If I had to sum it all up, people with a secure way of relating live from a quiet assumption. That connection doesn't need to be forced. That interest shows itself. That consistency matters more than words. They trust that if something is meant to grow, it won't require self-abandonment. And that trust makes them feel calmer, clearer, more grounded. Not because life is easier, but because they're not fighting their own emotions all the time. And if you're already practicing even a small part of this, you're probably closer than you think. If this resonated with you, you can like the video, leave a comment, or just stay around. We talk about relationships here without drama, pressure, or the need to fix anyone.